This lesson is going to discuss complements. Complements in grammar can be adjectives or nouns. If they're an adjective, we call them a predicate adjective. If they're a noun, we call them a predicate nominative. Here are two sentences that both have complements. The first one is, Mrs. Cody is short. Now, you may not think that's a compliment because being short may not be favorable, but in terms of grammar, compliment is not the same as complimenting somebody. It just means an adjective to describe them. In fact, I could say Mrs. Cody is ugly, and that would also be considered a compliment in grammar because it's spelled differently and it means something different. It just means an adjective that describes the subject. In the second sentence, Mrs. Cody is a teacher. That is also a compliment in terms of grammar. In this case, it's a noun. Teacher is a noun that could replace Mrs. Cody because I could flip the sentence around and say, Mrs. Cody is a teacher is Mrs. Cody. We call that a predicate nominative. So nominative, just like noun, both start with an N. Regardless of whether you have an adjective or a noun complement, you're going to diagram it and mark it the same. So let's start with the basics, the subject and the verb. Get my pen. The subject is Mrs. Cody. And in this case, the verb is really a helping or linking verb. So it's just is. Remember those helping verbs, is, are, was, were, did, will, could, should, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so I've marked my subject and my verb. The only thing left is short. And as I said before, short is a complement. It's an adjective that could be put in front of Mrs. Cody. Short Mrs. Cody. So we're going to mark that with the letters P, A, that stands for predicate adjective. If it was the other one, it would mark it with the PN for predicate nominative or predicate noun. All right, now we're going to work on diagramming this. You would diagram this much the same way that you did the direct objects. The direct objects are when you have an action verb. But we don't have an action verb, so we're going to be looking for complements. So I'm going to put the subject on this side. And since it's a proper noun, you put all of it. And on this side, I'm going to put just the word is, because that's the verb. Now, short is going to go in the same place that a direct object would go. Only you're going to draw a line that is slanted. That slanted line tells you that you have a complement. It's almost as if you could take and draw an arrow as such back to the subject. Mrs. Cody is short. The complement is referring back to Mrs. Cody. Okay, but you don't have to draw the arrow because this line right here that's slanted implies that arrow. Now, when you get to lesson 17, you're going to notice that they're combining both complements and direct objects. If you look at the directions, it says to decide first whether the sentence has a subject complement or a direct object. In order to know which one you have, it depends on what kind of a verb you have. If you have an action verb, you're going to have direct objects because objects receive the action of the verb. As in, I kicked, what did I kick? The ball. The ball is receiving the action of my kicking. Meanwhile, complements come when you have linking or helping verbs, such as is, are, was, and were. Okay, so I have two sentences here, and I decided to use the question one. because that, for some reason, when there's a question, it tends to mess students up. So let's first find the subject and verb. The first one is the young defendant appears frightened. This sentence is about a defendant, so that's your subject. These two words are going to be adjectives to describe the defendant. Appears. Now, what is frightened? You might be thinking appears is an action verb, but in this case, it's actually a linking or helping verb. Appears frightened is an adjective describing the defendant, because we could say the young frightened defendant appears before the jury. Okay, so frightened is a predicate adjective in this case. So you would diagram it just like you did the last one, with a slanted line as such. Okay. Now remember, when you do questions, you typically have a helping verb at the start. Some of you marked that wrong on the quiz. I think it started with did. And a lot of you marked that as an adjective when it should have been part of the verb. So in this case, the subject is jurors, because that's the main topic of the sentence. It's about jurors. Actually, I take that back. It's not about jurors. This is about the decision. So the jurors is part of the adjective describing what kind of a decision it was. Okay. Is the verb. Final, the decision is final. Final is the decision, so that is a predicate adjective. Right? It's a final decision. You could put final in front of decision, final decision, and it would make sense. Okay, and that one you would do the same way with the slanted line to indicate that it's a predicate adjective or a complement. Now let's look at one more sentence on lesson 17. This is number 5. And in this case, we have the victim's parents are giving testimony. So who's giving the testimony? It's the parents. So that is your subject. Are giving is your verb. Right, so these would be adjectives telling you what kind of parents they were. They were the victim's parents. Are giving. In this case, giving is an action verb. You can see somebody giving something. So when you have action, you're looking for a direct object. So giving what? Testimony. Now, if it said, are giving Frank testimony, Frank would be your indirect object. But we don't have an indirect object in this case because we don't have a to whom or for whom. We just have a what. They're giving what? Testimony. So if you remember back to the direct objects we did last time, you're going to mark it similar to the complements, only the line that's here is straight up and down. So you would have parents are giving testimony. Down below you would have the victims. So you'd have are giving. That's the verb is two parts. The helping verb is are, and the action verb giving.